Vick was enjoying himself at the sheds. He was working very hard, and the engines had accepted him as a resident at Euston. Vick has a big heart, and is more than happy to help any of the engines. Most recently he had been assisting Fred with his trains. The old engine was beginning to tire out. Steam was leaking from many places. The crews would only patch the leaks up, but it soon became obvious that Fred needed an overhaul. Rumours soon spread around the yards that Fred could be replaced by Vick, but Vick was confident that the 4F was in safe hands. "How do you know Fred isn't going to be scrapped?" asked William insensitively. "Yes, thank you, William, for getting straight to the point," huffed Fred. "I weigh much more than Fred, so that means I can't go on many of the lines he is allowed on," explained Vick. "Fred is too important. They're sure to give him an overhaul." The engines appreciated Vick's kind words, but all of them seemed a little doubtful. Fred had given many years of service, and with the introduction of more diesels it seemed perhaps that Fred's days were numbered. Vick pulled Fred's trains as often as he could, but all the extra work began to cause problems for his already troublesome engine. Vick ploughed on, but soon it became necessary to give the diesel a rest until he was fit enough to go back to work. Even when he was out of service, Vick stuck close to Fred and would cheer him up with jokes and stories. One evening, when all the engines had returned, Vick told them all the story of the Great Train Robbery. "I've heard of this," cried Jimmy. "It made headline news for months." "The Royal Mail train was hauled by one of my friends," began Vick. "He was an English Electric Type 4. D326 we called him. After the robbery, he was never the same again. Very skittish and jumped every time he saw a red signal." "How much did the robbers get away with?" asked Ivert. £2.6 million, replied Vick. The engines all gasped with surprise. "Can't imagine what you could do with all that money," exclaimed Terry. "Well, one thing's for sure," added Vick. "Let's hope no one tries anything like that ever again." All the engines wholeheartedly agreed. The next day, the engines were rudely awakened by an ear-piercingly loud whistle. A Johnson 3F steamed into the yards. The engines were not impressed at his bold entrance. The shedmaster climbed down. "This is John," he announced. "He has come to do Fred's work so Vick can get back to pulling his own trains." "Does this mean I'll be scrapped, sir?" asked Fred quietly. "I don't know, Fred," sighed the shedmaster. "Your working life is now in the hands of the railway board." The shedmaster left without saying another word, leaving Fred wondering about his future. William gave a disgusted look at John. "Oh, great! Replacing the old with the older now. Should it stand your tank?" grunted John. "I know your class, all pedantic fools, a lot of you." "I'll have you know I'm called William, and we're not pedantic at all," he snorted furiously. "Respect your elders." "How can you respect something if you don't get respect back?" interrupted Terry. "Ah, a scouser, eh? Better keep an eye on you or you'll steal the coal from me very tender," retorted John. "You what?" "Here we go," whispered Ivert. "For an old engine you've got a nasty attitude," added Vick. "Old? I'm in better nick than you," snarled John. "Apologise at once," snapped Fred. "Same goes to you. My class have gone on for years without any faults. You lot can't say the same." "Oh, shut up." Jimmy tried to break the argument up. "There's a van train waiting for you at the station. Run along and collect it," he puffed. "I don't take orders from shunters, and I take whatever train I want," grunted John. "You better get lost before I show you what, old-timer," roared Terry. John steamed away, leaving the engines in shock. They had never met anyone as rude and insulting as John. At the station, a special train was waiting for Arthur. It was a train consisting of banknotes heading to Scotland. A high-value package coach was coupled to the small train. Men began loading banknotes in the coach as John steamed in. The train would also deliver the usual mail that would be dropped off along the way. John snorted at the van train beside the special. "Stupid vans. I take whatever train I want," he grumbled to himself. The driver and fireman were stupidly persuaded by John to accidentally couple him to the mail train. The men had finished loading the banknotes, and the train was ready to depart. John sizzled excitedly when the station master approached the locomotive. "What are you doing on this train?" he demanded. "This has been assigned to Arthur only. Uncouple this engine at once." As the crew dithered around, John blew steam at the station master rudely. He walked crossly away to complain to control about the loco. Just then the signal changed, and the guard blew his whistle. John steamed triumphantly away. "Silly old station master," he chortled to himself. Further down the line, at a quiet level crossing, 2 cars pulled up alongside the line. The men wore dark suits and balaclavas over their faces. They were lying in wait for the mail train. They had been tipped off about the special train and were planning on committing a copycat crime similar to that of the Great Train Robbery. Presently, they heard a whistle. John raced along the line, unaware that he was about to steam directly into an ambush. The robbers had parked a car along the line, and John had no choice but to stop. "What's going on here?" he grunted. The robbers pounced. They charged the cab and overpowered the driver and fireman. "Help!" they shouted. They were quickly tied up. The car was moved, and before John realized it, the train was now under the thieves' control. "Come on, lads, let's get this to the drop-off point," one shouted. "Someone help!" cried John. As he pulled away, John felt petrified. He didn't feel very outspoken and clever anymore. The robbers had encountered on passing a small signal box along the way, and were caught out by the signalman. He raised the alarm as he saw the criminals inside the open cab. Realizing they had been caught, they needed to make a getaway, and now John found himself running at a dangerous speed. News travelled fast, and soon the police commandeered Ivett. "You're the fastest and closest engine to the robbery," called the policeman. "Do you think you can keep up with him?" "I'll do my best, sir," replied Ivett bravely. As John could be heard approaching in the distance, the chase was on. At the next junction, Vick had broken down. He had been called out to assist a freight train, but his engine still hadn't had enough time to recover. "Get this engine off the line, there's a runaway coming," shouted the signalman. "Oh, sugar," cried Vick. There, heading towards him, was John. John had finally been brought to a stop. The resulting shove kick-started Vick's engine. The robbers could see Ivett gaining from behind. "Push him out of the way!" yelled a thief. "Oh no, you don't," huffed Vick. As John was forced into trying to push Vick out of the way, the powerful diesel engine roared into life and pushed John and the train the other way. John's wheels spun and spun. Vick effortlessly trapped the train between himself and Ivett. The police arrived on the scene, and the thieves had nowhere to run. "Well done, Vick," cheered Ivett. "You're a hero." John remained silent. The next day, Vick was praised for his efforts. "You were marvellous, Vick," smiled the shedmaster. "So too were you, Ivett. You can give the Royal Scot a run for its money." Ivett blushed. Vick beamed. The shedmaster continued. "The railway board have decided you both deserve a new coat of paint." The engines cheered for their friends, but Vick soon interrupted. "But, sir, what about Fred? Is there any news of his overhaul?" Fred was stood next to John. The shedmaster turned to the 2 engines. "The railway board have also stated that they would like to see more responsible and reliable engines still in charge of freight trains on the railways," he added. It seems John's stupidity and reckless behaviour has not gone unnoticed. Fred will have his overhauled so to keep the freight trains in order. You may be old, John, but that does not make you any wiser than our Fred here." The other engines chuckled to themselves. "You still have a lot to learn if you're to be living in my sheds," finished the shed-master. Fred was overjoyed that he would be having an overhaul, and so were the other engines. "There's life in the old dog yet," teased Fred. Everyone laughed, while John just sneered vulgarly.